Hello, everybody. I'm Colonel Matt Scalia, Garrison Commander of Fort Benning, Georgia. I'd like to take this opportunity to share resources with you all to help us all, not just as service members, but as families, navigate our way through this odd, bizarre, and challenging environment through the COVID-19 pandemic. Through many past town halls and other videos, I've tried to share with you all many of the resources we are fortunate to have as a military community for us in such circumstances. I've mentioned family advocacy, I've mentioned behavioral health, and our chaplains. So I've gathered a couple experts here for this video to help answer some questions and provide you more information to help all of us, whether you're here at Fort Benning or whether you're a family member at some other location separated from your loved ones. We hope this information will help you and your families through this challenging period. So I have with me today Major Lois Colwell from Martin Army Community Hospital and Chaplain Jared Vineyard here with the Maneuver Center of Excellence. And they will help answer some questions I'll pose to them that I think we're all having. And I'm not just speaking as Garrison Commander, but I'm really speaking more as a father, as a parent, and a service member here, trying to navigate many of the same waters you all are through this. So with that, Chaplain, what are some of the stressors here in the COVID-19 environment?
So that's a great question. I know, the Army has got what we call the 5 dimensions of comprehensive soldier and family fitness. And what are those dimensions? It's physical, it's social, it's family, it's emotional, and it's spiritual. And I know during this pandemic, every one of those has been stressed. When you think of physical, the gyms are closed, and we're not able to do those normal PT routines that we've normally done. So that's been stressed. When it comes to social, we've been told to distance and physically separate ourselves from others and not gather in parties and other sort of things. So that's been stressed. When it comes to family, that's been stressed as well. Now, it's been stressed in a number of ways. Our extended family, we've had to stop those trips to see grandparents or them to see us, and so that's been challenging during this time. But then I know there's a stress of we're having to spend a whole lot of time with the family that we're with that we really weren't prepared or used to. And so, that's been stressed. When it comes to the spiritual dimension, there's spiritual disciplines. And some of these spiritual disciplines are inherently individual. And so whether it be scripture reading or prayer, but there's a lot of these disciplines that are corporate. Whether it's congregational singing or congregational worship or fellowship. And so that's been a challenge. And so this is another one that has been stressed. And then the last one is that emotional aspect. And the Army talks about being positive and optimistic, and sometimes that's a challenge when particularly all the other dimensions have been stressed so much.
Thank you. And so Mr. Colwell asked you the same question. I'm sure you'll agree with all of that, but anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, sir. I think it's important to emphasize that with COVID-19 pandemic, we are certainly in abnormal times. This is something none of us have lived through before. And that gives a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's a major stressor right now is the uncertainty. People are asking themselves, what if or what's next? What about tomorrow? What about next week? There's a lot of unanswered questions which can cause some stress and anxiety, which I would say is very normal. Like I said, we're living in very abnormal times. These are very abnormal circumstances. And it is normal to feel some increased stress. And I'd like to echo what the chaplain said. Our routines have certainly been disrupted. Children are home from school, maybe we're home from work, we have extra time on our hands, we're struggling because we're used to getting up the same time, children off to school, and now that's all been turned upside down, and it can be very difficult trying to navigate your way through this. So that's another challenge, is just kind of how do we keep a routine, how do we keep ourselves from not getting too stressed and anxious. So I'd say yes, the uncertainty and definitely our change in routines has been the major stressors with COVID-19.
Thank you both. And just speaking from experience, whether it's the gyms closed, losing an outlet, for us to help reduce some stress, more more time with the family, more family home. I've got a toddler, a preteen, and two teenagers, and so all those different challenges. Not having school, but still having school, but from home, and finding a new routine is always a challenge. Almost kind of like an extended summer break. So with that, what are some of the stressors of so much time, not just at home, but time not with the ones we love, right? Because our audience isn't just those with families here living on post. It's I live in the barracks. I have my family that's far away, or my soldier's at Fort Benning and can't get to him or her. So what are some of those additional stresses we're just not familiar with?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, sir. For many soldiers, sometimes it's a break. Hey, I don't have to go to work. But also, if you have a family that's in an area such as New York, that is a hot spot for COVID, there's a lot of stress worrying about, is my family okay? There's also the stressors of, PCS moves. Maybe you're due to PCS, and now, as you know, that's been put on hold. So there's a lot of questions. What's going to happen? Am I still going to the same duty station? How long am I going to have to be here? Maybe you're a family with a child on the way. So that brings up a lot of extra stressors too. Where are we going to get our medical care, or what about the transition? So those are certainly some additional stressors. And there's also stressors, as how do we make sure our children are taken care of? Like you said, sir, now we're in a role of being a teacher, which is something a lot of parents weren't prepared for. So how do we help our children and keep our family stable during these times? I would say one of the most important things is keeping a routine. Making sure we're getting up the same time, same meal time, same bedtime. Because routine, it breeds safety, a sense of safety. And I think we all need that. That's important to have a sense of control, a sense of safety, keeping in our same routines, staying focused on the things that we can control.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate, sir, it's a great point, just being intentional about that. Because when we have these routines, it does give us that sense of safety. And so we have to really be intentional about that. And I know a lot of times for soldiers and families, in the past, we've been very intentional about a lot of things. With our careers, we're very intentional. With our, school schedules, we're very intentional. But now it's this time of unknowns and uncertainty, and so we're not sure what to do with that. And so a challenge is even to redirect our focus and to say, okay, this is the time that we've been given. How are we going to redeem this time? How are we going to be intentional with this time? And I think that's a challenge for all of us.
Okay, so follow-up question, and I'm going to tee it up for you first, Chaplain, because you're the one that first hit on the different dimensions of health, right? So with all these different challenges, what advice do you have for giving families on how to manage that time?
Yes, sir. I think it's a good question. It's a fair question that we all have to ask. When this first started and we were told to distance and everything began to change, there was a prayer that came to mind, and maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Serenity Prayer. And it's only about a sentence, but I'll read it. It's, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I've used this with soldiers during this time, and it's so good to just be reminded there's some things that I cannot change about this time. This mask drives me crazy. I do not like wearing this mask. But I have realized I cannot change that. So if I go to Walmart to get groceries, I wear the mask. And so that's one of those things that I've sort of let go, and it's freed me, so to speak. But there are some things I can change, and I'll go back to your question, sir, about those 5 dimensions of fitness. Because what we can do with this time is we can be very intentional, and we can use this as an opportunity to say, how am I really doing in each of these areas? And really to assess and to look at my family, for instance. Am I being intentional with my family? So when it comes to my wife, in the past we say, well, we're going to go on X number of dates a month. Well, one. We're going to go on 1 date a month because we've got 6 kiddos, and that's a challenge. And so the question is, are we doing that? Now, that doesn't mean we're going out to eat, but maybe we're going to have a picnic in our backyard. And so are we being intentional with this time that I'm given? And I can ask myself these questions in each of these categories. Am I being intentional with my family? Am I staying connected with my parents across the United States? We can still FaceTime, we can still call. And I can do this with each of these categories. And I think the categories are helpful because they give me a baseline to start asking these real questions about.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Colwell?
I would agree with the chaplain. We hear the term most recently now is social distancing, which is something we never heard of before COVID-19. But I want to ensure that we know the difference between socially distancing and not socially isolating, because this has been a very isolating time for many of our soldiers, many of our families. Just because we're socially distancing doesn't mean we should be disconnecting from others. This is the time that we need to be connecting with our loved ones, with our children, with our families back home, and keeping those connections and those conversations going. Because, they need us and we need them. That's really the main point. And it's really important to keep that conversations going, reaching out, and this is like the chaplain said, be intentional. This is take advantage of this opportunity. Maybe things are a little bit slower to redevelop those connections that we have and strengthen those.
So I appreciate that, right? Taking the opportunity. And I think that's, personally, my family maybe didn't we struggled in the beginning, but I think more recently we've been doing just that, trying to take the opportunities. And I've also noted I'm calling my mother after this. Okay. Okay. So listen, I really got two more questions. Before I ask you about the resources available, I first want to ask you what have been the problems you've seen. Have you seen an increase in any particular type, not just a problem, but perhaps demographics? Who might be having more problems than others? And Chaplain Col, or Major Col, we'll start with you.
I don't think we've seen a difference in demographics. I think it hits everyone differently because everyone has different circumstances. Like we said earlier, maybe your family is here and you're just doing very well during this COVID pandemic, home with your family. But maybe another person has family members that are across the country. Maybe you're concerned about them. So I think it hits different people differently during this pandemic. And so what have we seen? We've seen an increase in some stressors. I think the chaplain alluded to it. Soldiers are doing well, taking care of themselves. They're very resilient. And I think most of the stressors is coming from what about others? What about my loved ones? What about others, my family back home that's in New York or Chicago? Also, a concern that we have is increased alcohol use, which is not surprising. Since a lot of people are home, there's not a lot to do, like the gyms are closed, things are shut down. So we have seen some increased alcohol use. And a lot of times that's just kind of due to boredom. That's just due to, not even being intentionally maybe drinking a little bit more than you usually do. And usually it's a spouse or a battle buddy will say, hey, I've noticed you're drinking a little bit more than usual, what's going on here. So we've gotten some increased incidents of alcohol use. And so, being in behavioral health, we do have substance abuse clinicians on hand. There are resources out there for increased alcohol use. And I can talk about those later, but there is help available for those people going under more increased stress.
Thank you. Chaplain?
So I agree with Major Colwell that, I think across the board there's this worry, but the worry is not for self, it's usually for others. I have family in New York, I have family in New Jersey, my parents are, there's worry for others. There's a phrase that we coined, it's been at Fort Campbell a number of years ago, but stress is a given, stressing is an option. And so the question is, what do you do with the stress? Stress isn't a bad thing. It can be, but what are we going to do with it? And if the stress drives me to something positive, then that's actually good stress. And so the question is, how are the soldiers, how are the family members coping? And I think there's positive ways to cope. Then the stress can drive me to do positive things, to write notes. And I don't know the last time I wrote a note, but to send an email, to make that call. And then there's some other, there's some negative ways to cope. And so that's the challenge is, if a soldier or family member is coping in a negative way, it's usually just to get me through the near term, But the question is that going to help me during the long term? If the answer is no, then that's when they need to sort of self-identify, hey, I may need some help, or a battle buddy or a family member to say, hey, I don't think things are going well, and then to get engaged in order to seek help and resources.
Fantastic. And so right to my last question there, what is available to help? And you know, of note again, we have a chaplain, we have somebody from behavioral health, so what others might think is two very different options, but you know, please help talk to the audience about what you all provide.
Absolutely, sir. So from the chaplain standpoint, every unit, or just about every unit, there may be a hole here or there, but every unit at Fort Benning has a battalion chaplain, has a brigade chaplain, and that chaplain is a great resource to really fill in the blank. And so the chaplain will talk or listen to whatever the soldier or family member brings them. And so the family members can know that that resource is 100% confidential. And so we're the only people in the Army who have 100% confidentiality. And that helps, and that's positive for a number of reasons, but we're a safe place that family members and soldiers can come to. We can do it in the unit area, we could do it in a housing area, we can do it somewhere else, and we can be that ear. Now, every unit has a chaplain. We also have, you know, I know medical has role 2. You might have a role 2, so to speak, for chaplains when it comes to family issues. Fort Benning and every major post in the Army has what's called a family life chaplain. And this chaplain has an advanced degree in family matters, in family counseling, and he can really help focus and hone in on problems that maybe the battalion chaplain, isn't not able to deal with. So that is a great resource as well, sir. And I know one of the things that we've done as the chaplains at Fort Benning, there's 3 services that are going on right now online every Sunday. There's midweek devotionals from the RSO, the Religious Support Office, that are going on. I know at Crossroads, our chapel, the children's ministry is still going on. There's a midweek story. There's a Friday experiment. There's 2 services for children on Sundays. So we are reaching out in a number of different venues virtually, and we're able to be there physically as well when soldiers need that.
Great, thank you. Mr. Colwell.
Yes. So our Department of Behavioral Health, we are open. We are located on the 4th floor of Martin Army Community Hospital, Monday through Friday, 8 to 1600. You can walk in, you can call. We still are seeing our service members face-to-face. So at the hospital, we have our multi-D clinic, or otherwise called outpatient. We have our child and family service clinic, where we see dependent spouses and children, and also our family advocacy clinic is there as well. Like I said, we're still open Monday through Friday. You can walk in, you can call to make an appointment. Like I said, we're still seeing people face-to-face. If people are comfortable over the phone, we're doing that as well. We're doing a lot of virtual appointments lately with the COVID-19. We also have our Embedded Behavioral Health Clinic, which is located at Lawson Army Airfield, right across from Freedom Hall, building 2412. Our Embedded Behavioral Health Clinic, still Monday through Friday. You can walk in there or call to get an appointment and be seen. And also want to mention that if you're not comfortable seeing a chaplain or coming to behavioral health, there's other resources in the community as well. Military One Source is a great resource. You can call, you can go online, militaryonesource.mil, and you can get an appointment either over the phone. They also have a great option where you can go on their website and actually do a chat with a counselor, which is a great opportunity if somebody needs to reach out and get some help.
Thank you. You know, we've been talking a lot about service members, soldiers, family members, children. What about our DA civilians, right? Because we can't do what we do on Fort Benning without our DA civilians. Are these resources available to them?
Yes, sir. We do have the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. That's available to them, as well as Military One Source. And this is something I want to say for everyone, not only civilians, but our soldiers as well. There's a lot of anxiety, and it's important to, when you're looking at the news, just make sure you're getting your news from reliable sources, CDC website, World Health Organization website, and then it's important to turn it off, because that can certainly increase the anxiety. So, like I said, get on media, make sure you get enough to get informed decisions, and then turn it off. And just, like I said, EAP is out there for assistance, and just make sure you're doing all the right things for yourself for self-care. Getting enough sleep, eating healthy, and still make sure you're getting the exercise that you need to within social distancing, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And I know for chaplain resources, the DA civilians are just a part of our valued team is our soldiers and our family members. So they can get the same support from the chaplains in whatever specific unit that they're assigned to.
That's great to know. So thank you both, right? Because that's important, not just for our DA civilians to know, but even their military supervisors, as they need to be checking on them as they do with all soldiers. And I guess what strikes me is, as we kind of wrap up here, is we've learned so much in close to 2 decades of war, right? We learned so much and so many more resources now for us than before 9/11. And it'd be a shame not to use them when the time needs. As leaders, we know we've heard and encourage our soldiers to seek these resources and to not be too proud. Even as leaders especially, don't be too proud. Break the stigma of seeking the chaplain or behavioral health for troubles we're having. That's just on deployment. But back here at home, in this again odd environment, we shouldn't be too proud to seek help. And I think that's especially important at Fort Benning, where we're more of a rank-heavy installation. Lots of leaders here. So got to be looking after for each other, not just myself and my family, but I got to be checking my buddy to my left and my right. Chaplain, anything else you'd like to finish up with?
Sir, as we were talking, the quote came to mind, and I wrote it down, and it's "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." I'll say that again, beware the barrenness of a busy life. And what struck me about this time is we in the Army, particularly Army leaders, are so busy. This is one of these times where a lot of that busyness has been removed, and we're able to look in and see, why am I really doing this? Who am I? And so we need to, again, take that opportunity to say, okay, I don't want to spend 20, 30 years of busyness and then look back and say, what is this all for? So this is one of those rare opportunities where a lot of the busyness has been removed or maybe changed slightly, but it's one of these opportunities to say, how am I doing? And really ask that question.
That's great. They use the word opportunities again.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Colwell.
Sir, you spoke of it earlier. This Army has been through a lot in the past 20 years, and Fort Benning is a very resilient community. I just encourage everyone to kind of look back on past experiences where you've dealt with uncertainty, you've dealt with the unknowns, you've dealt with increased stressors, and we all got through them. So just kind of keep that hope and, look on those past experiences. What did I do during that time to push through and get through that time? Because those past coping skills will help you get through this one. And there are lots of opportunities to do things and take advantage of some downtime with family and children and to remain hopeful. We will get through this as a community, and that's the most important thing, is to just keep, like the chaplain said, focus on what you can control and remain hopeful.
Thank you both very much. Thank you for providing your expertise on this situation we have here, and more importantly, providing the resources available to all of us as service members, as DA civilians, and as family members. Thank you all for watching. I hope this has been helpful for you. Hearing directly from those providing the resources to us. So I'd like to finish with just a challenge to all of us to check on each other. As leaders, we're familiar with checking on our soldiers, but as supervisors of civilians, please don't forget our vital workforce there. As peers, please check on each other, because as leaders, sometimes we forget about ourselves. We forget about our buddies. As family members, please check on our neighbors. And then lastly, please check on our own supervisors. Are our leaders getting the help that they need? Thank you all very much.